Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Iraq Historic Allegations Team, which is handling some 1,500 allegations of murder, abuse and torture carried out by British soldiers during the conflict in Iraq. The Prime Minister met with the Chiefs of Staff at the Ministry of Defence this morning, as The Telegraph reported that a further 550 historic allegations of crimes committed by British troops in Afghanistan are also under investigation. Senior political and military figures have criticised the move, saying that many of the allegations are ill-founded. Well, the Prime Minister was asked about the claims on her trip to the United Nations earlier this week. She said we should all be proud of our armed forces. We can be proud of the disciplined way in which our armed forces operate. The Prime Minister went on, if there are allegations of criminal activity, those need to be investigated. What we do need to make sure is that there isn't an industry of vexatious allegations. IHAT, the Iraq Historic Allegations Team, will be able to focus on cases where there may be questions of allegations. Well, we're joined now by Tim Collins. He led the 1st Battalion Irish Regiment in Iraq, and he said that many of the allegations are being made by parasitic lawyers. Welcome to the programme. How do you distinguish between a legitimate and vexatious claim?
Well, I think that throughout the conflict, not just in Iraq, now we see in Afghanistan, remember we also have a large caseload of investigations from Northern Ireland looking into special forces operations there. And I think certainly looking at Iraq, that the military police on the ground have already investigated these things. But someone saw an opportunity to make a fast buck. That was facilitated by government, and now it's become a runaway train. And I think when you look at the depth and the complexity of the lies that were told, the Al-Swedi inquiry, for instance, you have to say to yourself, enough.
Right. But it is difficult to distinguish between the two. You don't, I presume, want to shut down legitimate claims of abuse and torture in line with international treaties.
Well, it's a bit like, I suppose it's a bit like a referendum. You know, do you keep looking at these things until you get the answer you want, or do you look at it, get the answer and leave it alone? Right.
I mean, you've described it as an industry. You've described lawyers
as it's a multi-million-pound industry.
Right. And in terms of the numbers of cases reported today, 550, is that what makes it an industry as well as the money that's involved?
Well, I think it's a runaway train. There's 551 cases. There's 157 complaints.
Yes.
There's £7.5 million has been put into it. There's 124 MPs, military policemen investigating it. So far, they've dismissed 16 cases, and there hasn't been a single case of wrongdoing found.
Right, but would it be right to not look at them at all? I mean, if you're saying that this is an industry...
But they are looked at. But the point is they are looked at.
But they're looked at a certain level.
Well, they're looked at... I mean, the point of the bottom line is, and it reaches a wider spectrum, is that we're trying... This industry depends on applying the rule that applies in the street here in London to the battlefield elsewhere. Now, at that stage, if that's what we want to, then we should not be deploying troops. And furthermore, I think that it's now got to a point with the, we're about to see the worm turning, because I think there's going to be military people bringing cases against the government for harassment, and it's going to turn into an awful dogfight. And the bottom line is, I think that the leadership of the military have so lost the confidence of the rank and file, it might even be time that we need a union in the military to start addressing this and dealing with this, because that's what would happen in industry.
Right.
And if we're going to apply industry standards, then we've got to apply union standards.
What level, Tim Collins, would you like applied? If you don't want, as you say, the sort of laws of the street being applied, what levels of law being applied to troops should be there? Well,
what we have done for the last couple of hundred years, we have military law. It's what we did in the Second World War. It's what we did in Korea. We've moved the goalposts and discovered why we shouldn't have moved the goalposts. It's time to move them back.
What's your response here? Because there will be those who say, and the Law Society has responded, saying, as you would expect, that everybody needs protection, the most vulnerable, and they are. Some of these cases are being put forward by the most vulnerable, and there have been cases of alleged torture and abuse by British troops that need to be investigated, and they've got a point.
They do have a point. But Tim also has a point. We have a duty of care to these soldiers, these very young soldiers, because many of them are going from the UK. They've never been abroad, and suddenly they're expected to switch roles, aren't they, from being warriors to being police in very difficult circumstances. And Tim knows better than anybody else how difficult it is to tell these young soldiers that although they've been fighting an enemy, under all circumstances, they've got to treat the enemy with respect. But I think it's very important for us to remember that we have a duty of care to these soldiers.
Right.
And we've seen some, well, of course, we must absolutely respect the law. Equally, we must remember the terrible strain the soldiers have been under.
But that's the onus on the military, isn't it, to train the armed forces in a way that they understand that, as well as to protect them from any sort of miscarriage of justice that might be thrown their way.
But they're not being protected from miscarriage of justice. The simple fact of the matter
is that because the military isn't doing it?
The military command are so frightened of the lawyers, and of course the lawyers are the people who will gain from this. Of course the Law Society is going to, millions of pounds are on the table. They don't want to lose. They want that in their pocket. And the bottom line is that it's easier for a commander now to take a risk with a soldier's life and lose a soldier dead. That can be explained. But if you take an opportunity to protect your men and you do the wrong thing, they'll go to court. And that can't be right.
No, and the balance is tipped, according to Tim Collins. How do you redress it then? How do you stop it? Because there have been serious abuses. We had the case of Baha Musa, which was one of the most publicised, who died in British military custody. And that was many years ago, back in 2003. And a public inquiry said that that was an appalling episode of serious, gratuitous violence.
Yes, it's not, however, it's important to remember, it's not the law versus the army. I've interviewed in my career many soldiers, and decent, honourable soldiers aren't supporting the bad apples. And where there has been cases of abuse or illegality, soldiers want these to be rooted out. Soldiers want these people to be
or there are accusations of cover-up.
To be prosecuted. Soldiers don't want there to be a cover-up. They want, when they behave honourably, they want to be defended by their commanders, and when there are bad apples, they want to see them prosecuted.
And you make a very valid point. It's not that these people turn up at a police station in Iraq or Afghanistan to complain. All of these allegations have been raised by people within the military to say, I saw something that needs to be investigated, and then it expands. And that's when the vultures come in to start picking at the corpse.
Right.
We've got to stop that.
I take your point that people in the military are more frightened, if you like, of the lawyers than they would be to perhaps have one of their soldiers investigated.
My point is it's the military who are reporting these things.
Yeah, no, I take that.
Whistleblowers, in effect.
Whistleblowers, but the point is that it's not... the chap, for instance, we're talking about, Mohammed Saif, who is a notorious bomb maker. He's looking for compensation from our courts, a reward for killing our soldiers. Are we going to give him that? Yes, we probably are.
Right. In terms of the amount of money that's being spent, critics will say, look, it's costing millions. In the context of a war that's costing billions, isn't it a small price to pay to make sure human rights and international law is upheld?
In my house, I go around teenage and elder children. I tell them to turn the lights off to stop wasting money. I don't care if it's one light bulb or every light in the house. You don't leave the tap running. This is public money. It can't be wasted.
Right. What do you think should happen then? How do you stop this industry from spreading?
It's a very difficult question. We've seen a huge rise in ambulance chasers, haven't we, in the last 20, 30 years? It wasn't a phenomenon that I remember from years before. I think Tim's fundamentally right. I think soldiers have got to feel with certainty that when they go to their commanding officer, they will be taken seriously. If they whistle-blow, they will be defended. It won't be considered a dishonourable thing to do. The military has got to protect its own, and the legal system also has got to protect soldiers and also, where necessary, the victims.
Tim Collins, thank you.
Thank you.
I've been